Hey, what's up, guys? It's your girl Kia. So let's talk about the recent documentary, The Cult of Nature Boy, that came out on Hulu in a four-part episode. So, as you can see from the title, this is going to be a reaction, not a review. What's the difference? So, a review usually goes through episode one, two, three, four in concise order with a little bit of commentary. I am not doing that. My reaction is going to be to how polarizing the documentary has been, the understanding of cults, the reaction to other documentaries out there, what maybe had possibly been left out in this the whole scenario, because there's a lot of chitter chatter online about how Hulu was not very comprehensive in their documentary and they left a lot of things out, and just how they could have done better, and how some people who did not get arrested and put in jail, like Nature Boy did, should have been arrested and really are at fault for a lot of the abuses that happened in the carbonation cult. So first, what is the documentary about? So the documentary follows the, I don't want to call it an ascension, but the ascension slash creation of a cult by Eligio Bishop. He called himself Nature Boy. And he, started off like most cults start off. He is, he gains a little bit of a following. He's on social media, and slowly but surely, he convinces several people. At one point, 20 people, at one point, 40 people, from the way the documentary says it, to move with him to Mexico, then Costa Rica, then Hawaii, then back to the States, following him and his quote unquote teachings and his kind of quote unquote rise as the Messiah. So let's start with the first thing. A lot of people online are annoyed that this documentary is only 4 episodes and saying that they really left a lot out and it should be more episodes. If you are familiar with documentaries on streaming services, they never do more than 4 episodes. I think at the most I've maybe seen a documentary that had 6, but they mostly do 4. If you are looking for an extremely comprehensive documentary on the Nature Boy scenario or the Nature Boy saga, you should check out Hood Horrors on YouTube. Hood Horrors has at least 49 episodes, and they're anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour long, going through everything. I mean, it goes in depth all the way from him growing up in New York, the part where he lived with his sister and his sister put him out, and how he started the following, how he wanted to be healthy, how he didn't want to put any chemicals in his body, and then how it goes all the way up until his trial that happened in 2023 or 2022. I'm sorry if I don't have the exact year for the trial. So that one is very, very comprehensive. Hulu could not do that. Having that much information in a documentary, it would not have been digestible. People wouldn't have been able to process it. People wouldn't have cared. They would have given up on watching it. So that's why they condensed, excuse me, into a 4-part documentary. Now, I like I said, I do think everybody should go watch the Hood Horrors one, because if you're looking for the step by step, the A through Z, and then starting with Z point A, go watch the documentary. And what's interesting about these documentaries and listening to the chitter chatter online on social media about it is like, how could these people do this if people are so stupid and they're this and that and da da da. Listen, no one sets out to join a cult. I think everybody, we've seen enough cult documentaries, we've seen enough scenarios that no one just jumps out to join a cult. They join something that believes that resonates with them, that they believe in, that makes them feel comfortable and feel like themselves. And the one thing that Elagio did, Nature Boy did, is that he really played into that scenario or that thought process that we cannot be ourselves as Black people in America. We are oppressed. We are oppressed by the police. We are oppressed by the system. We need to go somewhere where we can be ourselves. And a lot of people, even educated Black young people, really believed in that. Like, I want to be able to be me without being, hindered by anything. And people follow that. And it starts off like, something that is welcoming, loving, comforting. And slowly it turns into something else. And we've seen that with all kinds of cults. And listen, there are different types of cults. So there are cult movements. Jonestown. The other one is Shinrikyo. If you haven't heard of Shinrikyo, it's a Japanese cult, very dangerous. They're basically a terrorism organization. There's sects of religion. That's sex, SECT. Like there's the can't my mind is blank. The Latter Day Saints Church, and then there's FLDS. That's a sect of that religion that is a little bit And some people would say a little bit more violent. They've actually had a recent arrest, and another documentary on Netflix about, the polygamy and danger and this the cult aspect of that. And then there's audience support that's also culty. You would consider the MAGA supporters an audience cult, and then there's people who follow product or service cults who believe in meditation or only use a specific type of water or lotion. Those are all considered cults. And the issue of carbonation is that it is a cult movement. And this, Nature Boy, like I said, we talked about Nature Boy appealing to Black fear. So let's just dive into a couple points. I'm looking at my notes over here on the other screen. So let's just dive into a couple of additional things. Like I said, nobody sets out to join a cult. And when you look at a lot of these people's scenarios, they found Nature Boy online. And sometimes being online can be a great place and a dangerous place because anybody is allowed to be online. And he really, really dove into social media. Like other religious people who have been cult leaders, like Jim Jones, who really dove into the religion because he knew he can get people in the religion. Nature Boy Eligio figured out that social media is where everybody is, and I can really, really dive into that and really draw people in that way. And he absolutely did. One of the key things about a cult, and he didn't even hide this at the very beginning, but it looked like fun, is isolation. His first mindset wasn't to maybe have people come to his house for meetings or maybe, have people just go on like vacation with him. It was immediately come follow me to this remote place where we can just be ourselves. Cult 101. Isolate your followers so they have no way to escape. They went to Mexico first and then drove to Costa Rica. And when they're in these desolate places, there's nowhere for them to go. Nobody spoke the language except for one person. He's convincing them that this is like the right, safe thing to do. So they're giving him money. One person actually gave their entire inheritance to him because where they're in this kind of vulnerable, remote state, relying on him for guidance because they trust him, they saw him online, you begin to think that this person has a better plan. They got us here. He got us to Mexico. We're fed, we're dressed, and I am living on the beach. This is beautiful. I am living, by the water. So he must have the right plan. I want to see where this plan goes. So I'm going to give him more money. But the more money you give, the more trust you give to him, the more isolated you have. And listen, he did bring other people into the cult. He drawn other people online. And it seemed like to me, and I could be wrong, it seemed like it was a lot of college girls who were under some weird impression that they would be able to have boyfriends within the cult. Like that part to me is very odd. Like a girl gets online, meets a guy, likes the guy, they become a couple in the cult. It's very, the whole thing is odd, but that was particularly odd to me. But Mexico doesn't work out because, he didn't like it. So then they moved to Costa Rica, which is even more isolated. Costa Rica is not close. I mean, you're driving even further in. And again, they're relying on him for everything, not just spiritual guidance. They're relying on him for food, water, shelter, because he has the plan. And of course, you're watching the documentary, there's issues when they get to Costa Rica. They drove a car down, from what I remember, they drove the car down from Mexico and didn't get it registered in Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, you need a visa. Like any country you go to, you need a visa. Your car needs to be registered. And they put them in jail, and they were in immigration jail for a very long time. And then they were kicked out of Costa Rica. After Costa Rica, they went somewhere else. But even though the Costa Rica thing happened, it didn't stop him from being online. And that's the thing about being online. Nothing can really stop you. As long as you've got a Wi-Fi connection to the phone, you can be online. I feel like, in the Jonestown situation with Jim Jones, if some Christian official or building inspector would have come and shut down the building of the church, it probably would have slowed down the movement or something, because they're saying, no, you can't meet here anymore. Or if the police would have stepped in while they were in San Francisco, it would have slowed down things more. But with online, he wasn't saying anything illegal. He wasn't saying anything bad. At the very beginning of this, he was just telling people, You want to be free. You want to be self-reliant. We need to get where we can be Black people. We are kings and queens, and God has it for us. He was saying all the things that people want to hear. So people kept coming. Then COVID hits and more people decide to join. But around this time when the Costa Rica incident happens is now when his mask starts to slip. And again, this happens subtly with every single cult we ever see. The same thing happens with the FLD. Same happened with the FLCS. Again, I'm going off documentary. Same thing happens in Jonestown. Everything starts out great and happy, and then one thing gets weird. But as a follower, you go, oh, okay, well, this one thing weird, not that big of a deal. It's fine. One thing's weird. Then another weird thing happens. And you're like, okay, that's the second thing weird, but we had all these good days before, so maybe somebody's doing something wrong, we'll fix it. Then another thing happens. And another thing happens. And the weird things become so commonplace that your brain just kind of goes, oh, well, it's probably supposed to be like this, and maybe I just didn't notice it before. It's probably all fine, and he still has a plan because we still do have good days, so it's okay. Well, my brain will just go with it. Like I said, no one starts off in a cult. You slowly, gradually get lulled into being into the situation that you end up in. It's almost like, how you, I think it's how you boil or cook frogs. How you don't drop them in boiling hot water because they'll jump out. You keep them in lukewarm water, and then you slowly turn up the temperature until it's too hot and they can't even get out. It's that situation. So people think that Nature's Boy's members are just as guilty as he is. I'm not gonna pull up anybody's TikTok videos, but because there's several. But this one is a little bit of a dicey one to talk about because I've seen the videos. I've seen the videos in the documentary on YouTube, the Hood Horrors. I've seen them on the YouTube channel. I've also seen them live when this was going on. He is hitting people. He is abusive. He is abusive to the men. The women are abusive to each other. He was abusive to the girl Velvet. All this played out online. So do I think his followers are just as guilty as him? My opinion is no. And everybody on TikTok saying they're just as guilty, just as bad. You're not understanding the power of a cult. When you are relying on somebody for everything, when you are in a desolate location where you can't just pick up the phone and call anybody, where you are reliant on basic sustenance and food and having friendship and conversation and not being kicked out, it is hard to have your own voice and stand up. And I think that's what a lot of the men were dealing with. And at a certain point, they all got so brainwashed that this must be okay. And the way I'm thinking about it must be wrong. So I don't think these men are just as guilty. Again, they got lulled into a sense of, I want to be closer to him. He is my quote unquote Messiah and God. I need to follow him wherever he goes because that is just what I need to do because that is what feels right at this point. One of his followers that was actually in some of the filming of the documentary, well, not documentary, but in some of the filming of his videos, also tried to testify for him in court and is still following him on TikTok. I forgot what the young man's name is, but he has been hardcore. Eligio Bishop is innocent, hardcore Nature Boy this entire time, even though he was in court and someone asked him, so you've never seen anybody abuse anybody in the carbonation? He was like, no, I haven't. And they played a video like, but what about this? And he's like, well, I mean, I don't know, and that's different. And it was just really, really sad. So if you guys think it's odd that those guys would stand there while these horrible things are happening, but you don't think it's odd or just it's fine that this one kid has been following him or man has been following him from the time he's filming him, Nature Boy filming his own videos to now. I mean, honestly, what's the difference? It's all those men that were in the cult and this boy who's still following him are all victims of abuse. Now, there is a rumor out there, and I'll give my opinion about it, that these men have been abused intimately. That's the word I'm going to be using now on my channel. They have been abused intimately. And a lot of people are saying, of course they have, of course they have. I will say, I do not know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I bring up the Jonestown cult because Jim Jones actually was abusing men intimately in his church. I guess you wouldn't. I guess you can't because they are in a cult. You can call it abuse, but at the time, I'm pretty sure those people thought I am just because they called Jim Jones father. I am just loving father. And some of those guys who were in the cult are probably just thinking like I was just loving, my Messiah in whatever way because they showed videos of them feeding him strawberries and rubbing his feet and all this kind of thing, all while he is being, aggressive and violent towards them. So I wouldn't be shocked. And I understand why the men who are in the documentary don't want to come out and say that. You know, it, it's acceptable. This is going to be weird to say. It's acceptable for women to deal with R, but it's completely unacceptable and unrecoverable for a man to deal with any intimacy involving another man if they're claiming to be straight. So I get why men aren't going to come out and jump out and admit that these are the things that happen to them. But again, I would not be surprised. And I also wouldn't hold it against them. I hate TikTok sometimes because they're trying to make it seem like these men who could have possibly been intimate with NatureBoy, like, the way they were saying it's so inappropriate and so aggressive. And it makes me, like I keep saying, you have to understand what happens in a cult and the pressure and power that one person has on you. Heaven's Gate, Heaven's Marshall Applewhite convinced all these people that the Hale-Bopp comet was going to take them to another planet. He convinced these men to chemically castrate themselves. I mean, it was a Marshall Applewhite and the other woman whose name was Dope. They convinced these people where they ended up dressing up in Nike tracksuits and shoes and taking themselves away from the planet. This is not an odd concept. If you look at all these things that have happened, in the last 100 years with the evolution of cults. I mean, it's easy to see, and I would, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if these men have dealt with some kind of trauma. A lot of people are also discussing how these men who are talking about the documentary are so calm and just not really reacting to anything and kind of have a weird mindset. It takes a long time to deprogram from a cult. People are just now getting into this education to deprogram. I mean, when let's think about a cult the same way you would think about Ruby Frankie's kids. If you know who Ruby Frankie is, she's the woman who was with another woman, was basically neglecting and not taking care of her kids in a negative way. If you look at that. If you look at the Turpin family, that was the one who had all those kids who were living in squalor and one of them escaped. If you look at all of these situations of younger people being in these unhealthy, negative, awful situations, those kids are now older, 5 or 6 years from now, and they are still taking a long time to deprogram from that mindset they were raised in. The same thing with the cult mindset. It's the same thing. You get into this, it's loving, it's caring, it's wonderful, it's making you happy, and then bad things start to happen and you go along with the bad things and the bad things get worse and worse and worse and you still stay. When it's time for you to leave, you have no which way of knowing up and down. So we're looking at people who are maybe 2 to 3 years out from what happened to them, and they're able to sit and have a conversation, and maybe they're not as aggressive and crying or maybe as apologetic as they should be because they're still working through what happened to them. It has to be a really humiliating experience to know, especially because one of the guys is in the military, to know that you fell for this. That has to be crazy. And those videos that he was posting of Elijah, what he was posting of what he was doing to those people. Again, I remember watching those on social media. I remember reporting them. I remember everybody in the comments going, "What is going on? Why are we watching this? Why is he doing this?" That girl Velvet, who was his quote unquote queen. It was all very, very traumatic and sad. And it blew me away that it was taking so long for people to even notice or realize or do something about it, because so many people in those comments were reporting what was going on social media. People are making comments about Velvet and say that she tried to start her own cult and she was also abusive. Again, we are watching people who have had basically their autonomy taken away and filled up with Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, aka the Messiah, and they don't know what they're supposed to do after. And again, maybe, if Velvet did do what they're claiming, maybe she thought, oh, I'm just starting an organization to help and make it better and be more like what, Eligio intended to do, and then it ended up looking like a cult. You never know. So yeah, and my last comment is that people are still supporting him. You can go on social media and type in Nature Boy Innocent, and you will see people who are still supporting him, who are still saying that there's evidence. That their main sticking point is that one of the girls said that um, she didn't say that she was AR'd. She said that she did not know what else to do because she was scared in that moment. And then the police basically told her, well, you were AR'd if you were scared and didn't know what you were supposed to do, but you decided to do the one thing, you decided to, have sex with him. That is considered R because it is, because it's coercion. And a lot of people are like, well, she didn't say that, so that didn't happen. So they're just making this up. I'm like, even if that's true, even if this girl made up the R word situation, or she just went along with what the police said, what about the videos, guys? Like the Nature Boy followers that are happening online, how can you look at all of the content that he recorded himself and say, oh no, he's innocent. They're just trying to take a black man down. Look at them trying to take a black man down. That to me is insane. That's probably the craziest part of all of it, to know that he recorded himself doing all these awful things, forcing these women to fight, hitting people, getting mad at people, cussing people, calling himself the Messiah. Let's not even get to the other stuff that I'm not going to talk about, that having to do with him being naked around smaller people. You know what I'm talking about if you're familiar with this. I'm not going to go into it because it's too much. Yeah, so it's crazy that people are still supporting him. But those are my comments. And listen, I really want to hear other people's thoughts in the comment about what you thought about the documentary. And if you watched Hood Horrors, that whole documentary piece, because I didn't watch the first 2 episodes of the Hulu doc, because when I watched the first episode of the Hulu doc, I realized, oh wait, you're missing a lot of stuff that that the Hood Horrors had. So I'll just skip to the third and fourth one, because I didn't get all the way to the end of Hood Horror, so I wanted to see what happened afterwards and how kind of the documentary put together how he was taken down. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know which one you watched. Let me know how you feel about the people still supporting him online and how you feel about the other people. I'm very interested to hear, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great night, guys. Bye.